Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jeremy. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday to you. And welcome everybody to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with technology, change, innovation. This week, we're going to major a bit on claims and culture. We've got the slides back. We've got some jingles. We're all ready to go. So, there we are. Feel at home. Anybody who missed last week's show, we had nothing. We had nothing.
It was it felt very sparse last week.
Anyway, we had a chat. Right, so I thought I'd start off, Ben, actually, by having a look at this slide here. If I can bring it up. Right, okay, so I was looking at claims, as I was just talking about there, and this report was done by PwC and the LMA back in 2018, and it was and still is a good piece of research. I think it was Lee Elliston, who is the claims director of the LMA. Now it's Janine Powell. But this piece of work really kind of looked at kind of predicting the future. So how was claims going to evolve, and then what were the impacts on the claims workforce? And they had kind of a near term kind of within the first year, 3 to 5 years, and then 6 to 10. And I would just kind of snip these up to make them a little bit bigger. And we can have a chat about these. But yeah, year one, kind of right back, SCAT being done. I think those two things are done. And volume claim service, centralized audits, things like that. DA stats as well. That was something that I think has been achieved. I think what's more interesting is when you kind of look towards the more near-term stuff. So the 3 to 5 years, which is where we kind of are now, and you would have thought that some of this would have been implemented. So claims management orchestration, I think that is taking place, but it's not complete.
I'd say it's very early days on that. Yeah. But I mean,
and claims portals. Well, you've done
stakeholders with real-time claims data.
Yeah. So I think these are still all issues. They're still all issues, but they're, this hasn't been we haven't seen these develop fully. I would say. I think we're on the track though. Claims portals, you do a lot of work kind of researching those, don't you?
Yeah, they're well established outside of London, but for London, nothing. So that's a real big miss, I think, for London. They're 4 or 5 players now, and certainly the big 3 composites have claims portals out in the UK regions, heavily used, well regarded. I think they have to work, in concert with people, but they are good. They do work well, and they are self-service. I mean, currently they're really for brokers, so they're brokers self-serve, and there are chatbots on them and live chats and stuff like that, which is not mentioned here, but that's been quite successful. I think probably out in the regions there would have been Armageddon after COVID without these. I think they helped a lot, and still do. But so that is not ubiquitous technology yet, but it's very well established in the regional market, but not in London.
Yeah, and then moving on, sort of RPA, Internet of Things, direct settlement. I think they're it's still a long way off. And then we can flick to the next one, which is kind of 6 to 10 years, and this stuff is we're really at the
which is now, isn't it? Because this was written in 2018, so we're talking about this now. Yeah. So we're perhaps 5 years. I mean, we're perhaps 4 or 5 years behind on this timeline.
Yeah.
It's very interesting when you look at a timeline, isn't it? Because I know that these timelines in reports like this are set, as a guess, really. But crikey, timeline-wise, it hasn't achieved anything like as much. It'd be interesting to talk to Lee and others about it.
Yeah, interesting. And then the reason we're bringing this up is because, well, one, I've got the London Market Claims Conference that's going to be launched next week. We've got a stellar lineup. Colin Massen's giving a keynote, but we've got tons of claims people coming along. So I'm sure a lot of these kind of themes and issues will be discussed, and I think it's going to be very interesting now that we've had the development of AI, or the hype, or whatever you want to call it, to see how people are thinking about that within the claims context. And
yeah, funny that report wouldn't have known, obviously, at that time about COVID coming, and lots of areas has accelerated the impact of technology, but it doesn't seem, particularly in London, to have impacted claims at all, does it? I mean, you could say that TPAs, but then that's more of just an outsourcing operation, and the TPAs that are coming in, who are more technology oriented, are still finding their way, I think, into the market. It's still very much a kind of semi-automated world, I think, out in the TPA world. Yeah, so yeah, interesting.
And then you've got some work that you've been doing with kind of claims MPS trends, I think.
Yeah, so we obviously, people know that we do big studies on claims in the UK regions, overseas. London is the longest running one, and that's been interesting. So London service, if you look at the trends here from right down back 2014, what you can see over time is, if you look at the average in the middle, is actually generally it has risen, and it's risen above now, where it was very flat before COVID. It's gone up, and this is on a lot of data, so the rise like that is significant, really. And it's showing, as you can see at the top, it's been driven by a little bit of an improvement at the bottom, but definitely an improvement at the top. So competition really driving that change. I think what we're calling out a little bit is beginning to say is, okay, so if this is, got to a certain point where these players at the top have got quite high MPS scores, really, the question is, how do they have those MPS scores? How do they achieve them? And is any part of that what we might call innovative? And I think it's fair to say it's not. I think it's brilliant basics of good people service, some obviously workflow systems like Doco and Guidewire and various systems and so on, but equally those are kind of what I'd call basic systems. ECF hasn't been updated, for example, so we haven't really got any new technology in this space. A lot of this is being driven by human beings, really, ultimately. And while it's great, you should, I think the tenor of that report was that, and anything that's written about claims is lots of claims should be able to be at least partially automated. So we're looking ahead now to what does this look like in terms of automation. And if you can have automation, then do you free, because on the stage at TINtech last week, Zurich was saying that they were entirely focused on technology to free people's time so that they could deal with the more complex, difficult risks, which is, I think, what we've always felt would be the case. But that also, I think, also there's, for me, is this, but could you innovate? Could you have different types of claims proposition? They all look very similar at the moment. There are better or worse ones, as you can see by the gaps between the top and the bottom, but they all look quite similar. Could you have a Domino's pizza version of this at the bottom, and a Ryanair version, as I call it, at the bottom, and a gold standard at the top, and then say, well, people maybe pay more for this? And part of the reason I'm talking about this is that we are talking to a lot of people at the moment about, particularly brokers, who are saying, can and how do we use claims at the point of sale, as opposed to it just being a claim process? And can it be a selling point for the organization, both the broker and the carrier? MGAs, I think, also are alive to this issue. So maybe my call is that from here, because of the increasing kind of saturation of good human service, cost-wise and talent-wise, you've probably got to go into innovation that involves some kind of automation that then again frees people up. The question is, what do those people do? How do they take it forward? I think the report that we've just seen, the LMA report, was rightly focused on processes getting better. and that is, of course, what claims is a lot about. But it didn't really focus on a future where claims was very much the promise that you sold, the brand, if you like, of the insurer. And I think that's what's particularly interesting for me.
I think so as well. And it's funny you say that about Zurich on Tuesday at TINtech. I was, I've spoken to Anna Rita a lot, who's the claims director there, head of analytics, and it is interesting, kind of their take on how they're using the technologies to improve service in claims rather than to cut numbers or an efficiency drive. They're very much kind of got that kind of client focus, and it being about enabling employees to do a better job, or to do more, or to summarize things. I think the other really interesting case study that I heard at TINtech was the eShore case study, which I think you missed, Ben. But in summary, what it did was that it was using Gen AI to summarize conversations that were happening over chat. So when you get fed up with it and you go, I need to speak to someone, that someone then isn't firstly asking you the same questions over and over again. What are you calling? What are you calling about? The AI would kind of look back over the chat, summarize it, give the details to the operator, call handler, wherever it is, and then be able to prompt and help. So it wasn't making any decisions. It was just collating information so that humans could be, not duplicating and delivering a better service.
So if you can chuck this next slide up, that relates to this, I think, which is a change here. So what we've had for probably 6-7 years is speed was the strongest driver of that NPS score that you just saw. So this is a statistical regression analysis of what most impacts NPS. So actually now it's switched over again, it's a big switch because it's based on a lot of data. So communication is now top. Now, why would that be? And I think it does relate to some of the things you're talking about, which is that, and I'm talking about, which is, it seems now that we're moving into, both, and this is away from process in a way. It's about discourse. It's about what the conversations. What are we talking about in claims? Well, we're talking about communication, and communication is about talking and marketing and brand and service. It's all of those things really which seem to now be becoming more important. And I think this is because there is a shift towards the value of claims in terms of the commercial value of claims, not just the process efficiency of claims. And so again, it's a sign that times are changing, as Bob Dylan. Times they are changing, as Bob Dylan said. I won't try and sing it.
Oh.
Not today.
Okay.
Not after the week I've had. So yeah, I have always believed, that when you look at and I look at this data a lot, live with it really. It seems to me that communication is the essence of everything in most businesses, but particularly claims. It's such a rich area, whether that be even the most boring home claim, which people will discuss at dinner parties. What happened there? That's where people will have conversations about it. People say insurance is boring, but they talk about claims, through to the Baltimore event or windstorms. Insurance as a narrative, I think, is coming much more into the press and the public discourse, I think, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. But I genuinely think when we get to London claims, we should talk about this softer side of what it could be, because it's as important, I think, as all these processes. You write about one thing there, though, that an eShore case study is good, because I sense that most of the problem, if you like, in claims is duplication. A big part of the problem is duplication. Things that get done too many times instead of just do it once and do it right, which I think is a Chubb phrase, actually, and it's a very cool phrase to position a claims thing. We'll assess it, but we'll get it right first time. That that is a really important thing for claims, which it clearly doesn't do at the moment. And it ends up in a morass of, can we find what they said last week, or on which email did we say that? It's all that stuff, really.
Yeah. So if you take the last three things in your chart there, relationships, commerciality, and expertise, I think those things are kind of, so we've talked about communication, but the other thing is kind of innovation. It's how are you going to kind of bring innovation into claims teams and processes to kind of develop those last three areas. And I think as we're talking now, it's probably underpinned by that communication piece. If you've got good communications internally and then externally, by definition to customers, then you've got a platform to kind of build relationships. Have conversations that are more commercially driven in a claims environment. Develop expertise using the eSure case study, where you're in harmony with technology that's bringing data together in order to enhance service. So I think it's really interesting.
It is really interesting, and I think it's also, when you look, we break down relationships into what really matters, and it changes across what type of broker you are. For example, whether you're small or a large, a lot of it is still about, and for everybody, it's still about the most common factor is response. That's what a relationship gives you. Is I know you, Jeremy, and I trust you to respond to me quickly. But that seems to me to be something that can be automated, that part of the response. But then there's the solution that you want. If there's a problem with the claim, or you need a judgment call, and that's really where there's been a talent drain in the industry. And there's not necessarily in London as much, but certainly there, and there is. It's accepted, I think, by most people. There is now going to be a shortage of talent, but also we can't just keep on hiring expensive people and expecting them to, have to sort of untangle all of this administrative mess, which clearly from the LMA report has not yet been sorted. So somewhere here there needs to be both the breakthrough to alleviate the administrative burden. And that could be AI, of course, and it could be all the other things we're talking about, and orchestration, etc. But at the same time, I think you also need the organizations to see that they could have a proposition that meant that they had a competitive edge. And that's where we've never really been with claims, because there's always been the question mark about, well, is claims just a cost, or does claims help us make money? And that has been the kind of schism in the industry, really, of lots of people go, well, we're just calling it a cost, that's it, let's just nitpick people, and wrangle over the claims. And that's not great, obviously. Whereas others are saying, well, actually, we kind of intuitively think it does add value to what we offer, and it's part of our brand and so on. But I don't think that yet has been thought through fully as it's a real service that people will truly value. Because I don't think they believe it right at the moment. I don't think they believe insurers will pay out. And I don't think, we were at an event yesterday, lovely event, John Muir's retirement, which we'll talk more about next week. But there were a lot of claims people there. And I think, just talking to them, they're of the opinion that we still are much more in the, we're going to try and fight the claim. Not that they were saying that's the problem, not that they were doing it. They were saying that's part of the problem, is we're still fighting the claim too much. We're fighting among ourselves in London over it. And it's embarrassing, basically, is the word that's been used quite a lot. It's embarrassing when we can't agree on a quick settlement for a customer, a client, a big client. And that happens all the time. So we need to get over this hump of, we're not that sort of industry. We are an industry that is there to pay and to partner with people.
And I think that's the other thing that I was just going to bring in towards the end, and it was which is around clients and customers and being customer focused. And in order to deliver that service, you really got to understand what your customers require, and different customers have different priorities depending on what industry they're in. How big the claim is, what they're looking for, and how big their organization is. And I think one of the problems still is that that extended value chain with the customer so far away from claims, and you start to see it now being broken down. Paul Willoughby wrote a great article ahead of TINtech, where he was talking about, you've got all this great tech coming along, but where's the customer in the conversation? And it's something we've been talking about for a long time, whether it's technology claims or
it's a really interesting point, and there's lots of interesting points here. But if you say that everything needs to really be driven backwards from the customer or forwards from the customer, and that's a value chain. I mean, clearly the value chain, I think, is now, lots of people accept it, is broken in all sorts of areas in the insurance industry, and it was never there because it was a trading environment. And how do you rebuild this value chain? And I think that's quite a challenge because, as Paul has, clearly articulated, just putting in bits of kit here and there and software doesn't do that on its own. It helps with that. If I go back to claims portals, it's absolutely essential that you have great people service with the portal. And there are one or two organizations who basically did the portal and then fired people on the basis that we could save cost. And that has caused them immense problems with the quality of their service, immense problems that take a long time to fix. So there needs to be this kind of combined recognition of the value of the technology as it comes in. But what is its benefit? Its benefit is not a cost-based benefit primarily, because you probably had to spend a lot of money to do it. I think you should look at it as an investment in your brand, growth, profit, ultimately, for which the metrics should be now established in the industry, so they're not around the claims adjustment or the ratio as much as they are currently.
Yeah, definitely. You've got one more slide about friendly insurers. Is that related, or is that separate?
Yes, it is. So this is really it's not as if this isn't planned, Jeremy, and
no idea.
So this is an article that came out this week which does relate entirely to this, really, which is why insurance companies want to be your best friends. And this is a really good article, basically talking about some things that I think we already know about, which is the sort of life insurance, health insurance, preventative stuff that comes along with your insurance. But this is an article saying that insurers need to go, or are trying to go, much further. I think Zurich is very prominently featured in the article, talking about what it's going to do. And this is not just personal lines anymore. This is commercial. So this is buying into the idea that if you are a partner and you do certain things and you fix certain things and we help you, because insurers are in a good position to do that, then insurance will become A, more effective, B, cheaper, but you will, the insurance companies in association with those customers will be, there'll be more of a sort of positive partnership, which is great for the industry, and it will grow. So the article really argues that should be the case theoretically, but towards the end it talks about the difficulty the industry has is over trust. And trust is, of course, if you haven't got an industry that's trusted, then people won't buy into all of this stuff, because they'll say, well, but I'll do all this, but then you still won't pay the claim. And therefore, to me, again, we're back to communication. We're back to leadership. We're back to a proposition that's really thought through, is committed to by the leadership of whichever company it is, and is based on, I think, a commercial value that they perceive they will get, or a competitive edge that they will get by doing it. So that's a very interesting sort of theme and a space to watch, but it just brings in this other element of trust. Is there trust? I mean, if I go back to conversations only yesterday, but I mean, I could have had these conversations any week. I think my take is that between brokers and insurers, there is quite a degree of trust, but there is also quite a lot of mistrust and frustration and lack, areas where there is lack of collaboration. On the upside, I mean, I've been talking this week about, obviously we do surveys, but mutual surveys where both sides do a survey on each other, almost like a 360, which is I think is kind of one of the things you can do now to say, let's understand that we do run different business models. We have different roles, I suppose, within this value chain. We need to understand that better. Now, I'm saying this not because I want to promote something I'm doing, but it's because it's come from brokers, actually, in this instance, to say we want to know more. Now, why do they do it? Because it's not just because they're nice and they want to do it. It's because they say we can then promote ourselves as working on good service for the customer, and we can win business on the basis of that over our competition. So there's good commercial sense at the heart of it. But anyway, it's all these signals and signs of the discourse changing is very important, I think, in industries, because those conversations turn into change in the end. How long it takes, I don't know. And I'm not so sure that you see. I'll say one final thing. I'm not so sure in the report that we saw, which has lagged. If you don't have the discourse, if you don't have the leadership, if you don't have the belief and commitment and trust and all those other things we've mentioned, then that's why they slow down. Because, those businesses that develop the technology, and they've all got it, they can all get it. This is not really, not cutting edge stuff. They won't be able to sell it because organizations will say, well, it's lovely basic software, but I'm struggling with my business relationships, my broker partnerships, the market, etc. So it needs lots of things to be in the right direction and aligned, I think, in the end.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to let's move on slightly, because I wanted to kind of just reflect on some of the talks from TINtech on Tuesday, and I've got a little for people that don't know. So it's a technology conference that we run for around about 300 and odd people, all from not just the London market, but GI, SME, retail, as well as Lloyd's and London market stuff. So it's a good mix, and it's quite interesting how the conversations develop, because you're outside London, you're talking to people from the regions and in slightly different lines as well. So it's good. Henry Engelhardt there in the center of the picture. He's the founder and former CEO of Admiral Group. And he gave a really great talk, and he talks about mainly culture at a technology conference, which I thought was great, because whenever we talk to operations directors, technology, IT, whatever it is, when they're trying to deliver these projects, they always say it's not the tech that's the problem. It's the people accepting the tech or being able to work in a different way, and it's having that culture within the organization that can embrace the change that that the organization's trying to make, is willing to, and then it kind of builds that its own momentum, and then you have your employees fully engaged and saying, well, how else could we make this work for us? What other problems could this technology solve? Yeah. So I thought it was a brilliant talk. Obviously, decades of experience that he was drawing on, and some really great examples of how it manifested itself, both good and bad, during his career. He gave some really good examples that were takeaways. And I think it relates to our earlier conversation about claims and service. You have to have that culture of service. You have to have that level playing field where there aren't pockets in the organization that are treated more differently. Let's just say underwriters. You've got to have that level. Everyone needs to think they are part of a transparent level playing field where all the cogs of the machine are working together in order to deliver the output. You can't really
absolutely. And that's kind of a very old, almost kind of old school now in a way, thought about how you used to think about strategy, which was that to implement strategy, execute it, is everybody needs to know what their part is in making that strategy happen, make the boat go faster and all that sort of thing. I think that's still there, but I think we lost a bit of that, and we lose it a bit when we talk about technology, ironically, because sometimes feel like, oh, don't worry about it, then we don't need to think about all those things about people and how they operate and what they do. We'll just put the kit in and it'll be fine. Well, it clearly isn't going to be. So I think we've got to enter this age of innovation, if that's what we've got, with a very clear sense that this is going to be about, as you say, people having a very clear notion of what they're going to be doing. Interestingly, the work that we do on attractions to employers will suggest, beyond pay and basics, that culture is incredibly important to them, and also at the same time is a strategic direction, a vision, or where's this company going. So those two things are possibly one and the same in a way. I know there's different facets, but I want to know what part I'm going to play in this organization, and then it's going to be a positive one. I think when it comes to very large organizations, what turns a lot of people off is, I'm just going to be a small cog, and I will not be empowered. I won't be able to do anything, is the phrase. So it's incredibly important, I think, from attracting the best people, apart from the fact that when you get that going, as Engelhardt says, is ideas start to flow and knock off one another, and you suddenly get something that was massively bigger than the sum of the parts, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going back to claims doesn't, I don't think claims does that, if I'm being honest. I think they're too busy. I think I'm very, very, obviously very positive about my own clients, but all of them, work hard and do a great job, but they're not given the space and the time because of the way that I think the administration is to get that, to have that thinking, to do that. Let's lift the lid up and have a look at what's going on and see what we could do better. And I'm just not me saying that. I think people say that a lot, and I find it frustrating if I've seen a team one year and then I see them a year later, and this is really the first time that they've all been together to talk about it. It's like that's kind of the away day becomes an occasional event. I think we've got to think differently. I think we've got to have people saying, every day is the away day. We're always thinking about these ideas. They're not like for special days.
Yeah. It was interesting at the conference, actually, because that was one of the things that I said in my kind of opening kind of talk, was that one of the nice things about our conference is it does give you space and time to think beyond the day-to-day and just think a little bit more strategically. And I think it's important, because then if you've got an understanding about that direction of travel, then you can start to think, well, if that's the end goal, how are we going to get there?
Yeah, I agree. And I tell you, we're not going. I think we've sort of decided we weren't going to go on about Blueprint 2 being yet again postponed today. Yeah. But I'm going to bring it in because I think the part of the communication around that is the same thing. It's set up as we'll all wait until that's done and then everything will be okay. I mean, I never like that in business. It'll all be okay when we've got the X. That in life, it's not a great idea when I've got the new car, my life will be wonderful. It isn't. It's just you've got a new car and the novelty wears off. The fundamentals didn't change. You're still who you are. And I think that's the danger of the sort of the sort of the type of communication that's built around something like Blueprint 2. I'm heavily critical. I have been for the beginning, as you know, heavily critical of the way it was. No mention of customer. No, those weren't just, it's a good idea to have customer mention since they are customers. It was because it sets a tone for things and it creates an unintended consequence or effect, which is people just, and at your conference, people were saying, I'm not angry, I'm not upset, I'm not any of those things. I'm just switched off and flat about it because I don't know what goes in its place if it's not that. So it's built up into something that was going to be great and then it didn't arrive. And and people go, "Oh, it still will arrive," but people don't care anymore, and that's the problem. It's kind of like what Gareth Southgate is saying about the England supporters drifting away from his idea of or his vision, because he's so invested in that, but unfortunately he's unable to execute.
Yeah,
at the moment.
Definitely on Tuesday that was the case.
God, talk about flat. Yes, I mean that was the same thing. It wasn't just that it wasn't inspiring. It wasn't just the bad football. It was the fact we came top of the. It was the fact that it just was not inspiring football. If you ask most people, they just said, I don't want to have to be subjected to 90 minutes. I don't care whether it's England or anybody else. It was dull and boring and lifeless, wasn't it? Really.
Yeah.
So that's not something you'd have expected. I've never felt so flat about an England event, but it was just because it's so bad, and we can't let that happen in our industry. You've got to have excitement and inspiration and stuff going on, really.
Yeah. Good. Right. Thanks for that, Ben. That was good fun. So I'll tell you what. There's lots of things happening this weekend. It's Glastonbury on. We've already mentioned.
Yes, I saw them all at the station. They looked all quite clean. There'll be
you'll see
horrible teenagers coming back next week, won't it?
There we are. So what else have we got? We've got Tour de France starts as well tomorrow. Very excited.
Yes, that'd be good.
Because I'm going to watch the final stages in Nice this year because the Olympics are on, so they can't finish in Paris. So yeah, going to be finishing in Nice. So that's great, and the Euro's back on. So yeah, tons of stuff to do this weekend.
I'm hoping to get for the listeners. I'm hoping, well, the watchers. I'm hoping to get a quick report because my son's the chief reporter for the Daily Telegraph at the Olympics. So we might get a special, not from him, I don't think, because he won't have time, but a special secondary report from me on the latest from the Olympics behind the scenes.
Yeah, our man in Paris.
Our man in Paris, yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm not going to get taken to any of the events.
We'll just watch this space. You never know. There could, I won't. I don't want to, like I just said earlier on, I don't want to promise something that doesn't happen. It's not a Blueprint 2 thing.
Exercise. Okay, that's that.
I haven't said we wouldn't mention it. We have mentioned it several times. I'm sorry.
Yeah. There we go. Best laid plans. Yes, that's what we're going to be doing this weekend. Okay. Thanks very much for tuning in. We will be back next week. No, we won't be back next week because we are filming, aren't we?
We might do a pre-record, mightn't we? We'll see. Yes, but we are doing some filming, yes, for a future show. So, yeah.
Look forward to that. All right, good. Thanks, everybody. We will see you whenever we see you, and enjoy the weekend. Bye.
Great weekend. Bye, folks.